Good evening, Mr. Sharma.
Hello?
Yeah, good evening, sir.
Yeah, are you able to hear me all right?
Yeah, you're audible perfectly all right, sir.
Yeah.
So,
and you can see me also?
And brilliant. Absolutely, we can see you, sir.
Okay, great.
On the screen, Mr. Shinoy has also joined us. We'll start exactly at 6:30. Mr. Shinoy, he is Mr. Kartik Sharma, speaker for the day. Mr. Shinoy is the president of Calcutta Management Association.
Hello,
Hi,
namaste,
Kartik,
Mr. Sharma.
and good evening. Really delighted to see you and looking forward to your exciting session. Heard a lot about you, Kartik, and looking forward to it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
We'll start in a minute, sir, exactly at 6:30.
Sure. If you could ask me, Kartik, where are you currently based now?
No, I'm in New Delhi, sir. Right.
Okay.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. With the permission of the President of Calcutta Management Association and Speaker for the day, Mr. Kartik Sharma, we would like to start this leadership lecture series of ours. Before I request Mr. Shinoy, President of Calcutta Management Association, to kindly introduce the speaker and take us throughout the day, we thank everyone who has joined, because we will be joining. We have been got a registration of more than about 400. So slowly and steadily, I think they'll be joining in. I request everyone to, once the session starts, I request everyone to kindly put on the chat box your questions, so that when we have the Q&A session, we can put up the questions to Mr. Sharma. We also have this event simultaneously going live on Facebook page of Calcutta Management Association, LinkedIn page of Calcutta Management Association, Twitter, and also YouTube. So we welcome you all to kindly visit our social website, social handles. We also have amongst us, thank you, Mr. Garg. Mr. Garg is the Vice President of Calcutta Management Association. Thank you for joining, sir. So without much ado, may I request Mr. TVS Shinoy, President of Calcutta Management Association, to kindly welcome the gathering and introduce the speaker. Up to you, sir.
Thank you, Anirban, and Kartik, good evening and welcome again to the Leadership Lecture Series. And to all the colleagues joined in, hello Anil, and good evening to you as well. And to all the members who have joined in and all the participants, wishing you all a very happy Pongal. So today is the day of celebrations, and like India, a truly wonderful country, from Lori to Makar Sankranti to Pongal and the Ahmedabad kite flying festivals. I think this is a very, very exciting month with so much to offer. At the same breath, I am also hopeful that all of you are keeping safe. This variant of COVID in the wave 3 is playing like a slippery kabaddi, entering into every house and then running away quickly in a couple of days. I hope you all are staying safe. And more importantly, if you all have been impacted, staying quarantining yourself and being away for 3-4 days, it looks like this is not that big it doesn't impact us too much, but more importantly, I think we all need to be sure and safe about ourselves. Stay safe and do take all the precautions, and also significant gratitude to the surroundings which are helping us, our mates, our drivers, our security guards, everybody who's there, ensure that the ecosystem is safe and you're taking care of them as well. Well, it's wonderful to be connected again in the Leadership Lecture Series. And Kartik, we have this series where an eminent speakers like yourself come and share their thoughts. And to all our participants here today. We've got a fantastic speaker in Kartik Sharma, who is co-founder DcodeAI and National Chairman AIMA Young Leaders Council. Kartik Sharma is an emerging technology evangelist, having experience of building disruptive technology products and high-performing product teams. Kartik is an AI practitioner with experience in leveraging machine learning to develop conversation bots and other RPA-related solutions. Kartik is co-founder of DcodeAI, a DIY AI learning platform. Kartik led Ignisho to be part of Commonwealth First program led by Marlborough House, London, under the chairmanship of Lord Jonathan Marland. Kartik is a member of the All India Parliamentary Group on Artificial Intelligence, APPJAI UK, excuse me, whose aim is to explore the impact and implication of artificial intelligence. Kartik is a member of FICCI EdTech Task Group that focuses on using technology in learning processes in India and enable us to frame policy recommendations that we wish to take to higher levels in the government. He is a leadership fellow at prestigious St. George's House, Windsor Castle, UK. He is a member of the Institute of Directors, a student mentor, UK. He's also on the executive board of AIMA Young Leaders Council, on the board of International School of Artificial Intelligence, UK. The courses are endorsed by Gatehouse Awards and awarding body recognized by Office of Qualification Examinations Regulations, UK. He's also on the academic committee of AI course for Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam Technical University, and he's written books on AI for class 8, 9, 10th, 11th. The book has been appreciated by none other than Amitabh Kant, the CEO of Niti Aayog and the Government of India. He's a national chairman of AIMA Young Leaders Council, a mentor with NASCOP Women Wizards, Rule Tech. He's also a mentor with Atal Innovation Mission of Government of India, and experience of working with policy-level educational initiatives, implementation of large-scale education products. He's a guest lecturer, mentor in various educational and training institutes across the world, such as IIT, ISTPM, ISTD, NIPM, SRHM, IAMS, LSBU, London, IMT, VIPS, DSP, and many more. His work has been published on AI in the Indian Journal for Training and Development. Kartik is also a silver medalist from the prestigious IIT Roorkee in India. Kartik, that was a wonderful summary of your resume, a very, very impressive one, I must add. And I'm sure that your session over the next 45 minutes to an hour is going to be enchanting and extremely useful to all the listeners coming here. Kartik, thank you for being with us and looking forward to hearing from you, and over to you, Kartik.
Thank you, Sri Chinoy, for your kind words, and thank you everyone who's present here. I'm so glad to be on this weekend with you and to be able to share some insights around AI. And I would personally like to focus more around specific questions or themes you would want to cover. But I do have a small presentation which I'll take it as an anchor probably. But feel free to stop me in between anything specific you would like me to cover, because AI is such a vast subject. One can only scratch the surface in such a small sort of a session time. But I'll just give you a bit of glimpse of how, what, why, where we are in terms of AI. And as the title says, sort of how to extract signal from the noise, because there has been a lot of discussions, debates, and noise around AI around the world. But to be able to extract, specific areas of interest and to see how AI works for you in whatever shape and form you are, whether you are an entrepreneur or you're working for an organization, in your role, in your job function, in your process which you're handling, how AI can work for you. I would be happy to cover some use cases as well. Before we get into it, I just want to show you the small cartoon. I don't know how many of you follow Dilbert, but I sort of like it. And this cartoon says that there's a bot in between, and there are two people. And the bot says that mockingly, that I wonder whose job will I take first. And one of them says that you could never do my job. And the bot replies that I'm already doing it right now. To which the person says, you're not really doing anything. And he says, yeah, that's right. Let that sink in. So although it's a bit of a mockery, but it's also got a very serious conversation, right? Because most of us in our workplace think that whatever role, whatever task, whatever responsibilities we are doing is extremely difficult, extremely unique, and everyone over the period of time in their organization seems to think that they are sort of indispensable. But more often than not, when push comes to shove, we realize that that's not really true. Because especially if you're part of large organizations which have systems and processes in place, it's only a matter of time when that process gets more streamlined and is right for higher cognitive automation, which AI is, right? Because simple automation has already been done in most of the organizations over the last couple of decades. So it's only now about high-end, cognitive automation, wherein even things like decision making based on extremely sophisticated pattern algorithms, those can also be done. So back in the day, using ERP data or using software data, BI would be there, right? So you would get business intelligence, but ultimately a management, stakeholder or a decision maker would take a decision or a call based on that intelligence. But with AI, you have the possibility of creating autonomous decision making systems as well, wherein AI system can learn and understand various scenarios. It can do sensitivity analysis, and based on that intelligence, it can decide, and it can start to mirror and take executive decision as well, which a lot of organizations in the West have also tried and tested, and just as a backup, and they have seen results which have been more, sort of, how should I say, with human beings, sometimes as the number of parameters increases, our cognitive ability starts to diminish because we are not able to control so many attributes in one go. But with systems like AI, I mean, you could have hundreds of, attributes or parameters in a decision-making process, and it can take it and deliver it clinically. So long and short of it is that one doesn't need to fear or think about that how AI is going to disrupt my job role or function, or whether it's going to take away my job. But the larger discussion at play is that how we can understand and preempt how AI will impact our role, and what precautionary steps we can take to upskill ourselves. So it's not between AI and humans, but it's about humans who know AI versus humans who don't know AI. And people who would not know AI, irrespective of their job role and function, with passage of time, will start to feel more and more irrelevant. I'll give you an example. Let's take the example of HR, a very standard function, right? So in HR, you have something called, let's say, a recruitment. Now, typically, a recruitment function or talent acquisition function works in a very structured manner, right? You have a job description based on manpower acquisition document or requirement. You map the job description with that requirement, and then you source candidates from different channels. Could be Naukri.com, LinkedIn. You could run ad campaigns, and somebody manually maps it and selects and screens the candidates. Then you have a technical round, then you have a HR round, and the whole process goes. But imagine if AI steps into this process, how it will look like. So you could have historical data across industry, across size of the company, across geography, and you would have predetermined job description templates, right, which you can use. Then you can use scripts using Python libraries, which can scout through various candidate sourcing portals, shortlist candidates, do a keyword-based mapping, or even a higher order mapping using natural language processing, which does both semantic and syntactic analysis. And you could shortlist candidates using a simple robotic process automation. You could do video interviews like this. And in video interviews, you can use computer vision or machine vision to understand and shortlist people based on their answers, their body language, their gestures, their tonality. And based on the shortlist, you can even generate, offer letters and use chatbot to provide support to the candidates while onboarding them. So a recruitment function, which on one hand can be extremely manual, But if you look at how AI can disrupt it, and it is already disrupting it in some of the large companies, you will begin to see that if a HR professional is graduating right now and he or she doesn't perceive a world of HR in which AI is going to impact his or her job role, will soon be second guessing that what role do I have to play? Robotic process automation is doing sourcing for me. It's doing JD matching with the resumes. It's doing video interviews. It's shortlisting candidates based on computer vision. And the person start to wonder what value are they adding. Wisdom is if they are able to preempt this sort of a scenario and plan and prepare their career planning in a way that AI is going to be there. AI is going to change my job role. What can I do? How can I upskill myself? And I think that's where the important part is, wherein as individuals, we should not fear about this technology, but we should start to preempt it. In terms of purely numbers, also, if I talk about by 2030, which is not even 7 or 8 years from now, almost $13 trillion of value creation is being perceived through AI, and these numbers are driven primarily by three sectors. Retail, I think most of us have already starting to see the impact of AI in retail, especially in analytics, and even in Amazon Go stores in US, where it's contactless shopping. There aren't any shopping store assistants, right? Then travel, when many of us have seen travel, recommendation engines used in OTAs. We have seen it, RFID and IoT-enabled systems in hospitality industry. Aviation industry has been using, AI for autopilots for a long time now. And then, of course, transport and logistics. But slowly and steadily, you see it in education as well, healthcare, and AI is sort of slowly percolating in all sectors. No, once we think about how AI is impacting our workplace, parallelly in the current time, these other 3 to 4 things are also happening, right? Now, when I graduated maybe 15 years back, an average person used to change their job maybe 2 or 3 times in their career. When my dad graduated, he did one job for his life, right? And now somebody who's graduating, they will change 10 jobs at least in their career. So nobody is actually, studying or skilling themselves for a career. It's a ever evolving career option, which is there. Then the second is gig working. So nobody is now planning to hire or even work as a 9 to 5 or a 9 to 9 worker. I mean, I'm surprised even in our organization, people often come up to say that, I want to do a couple of other gigs. Can I work for you for less than 8 hours? And that's something which is unheard of back in the day. But now it's a very common conversation which people have, that they want to work less, but do multiple gigs to expand their horizon. Then work from home, obviously, most of you are aware of. Fourth one is very interesting. In fourth one, people are now being expected to wear multiple hats. Now, what does that mean? So if I talk about technology, for example, which is my area of operation. So when I was graduating, 10 to 15 years back, the understanding was that people would be front-end developers, they would be back-end developers, and they would be database or server-side manager. But now, companies hire what they call as full stack developer. So that person should be backend and server side as well. And the companies are willing to pay a premium for it. They're not expecting that, you should only know all these technologies, but you'll be paid for one. So that's the expectation change which is happening. And AI already, I've told you how it's changing job roles, and other emerging technologies are also active. So if you link it, AI is changing the job role. The nature of workforce in itself is changing, which brings to the question that how or what you can do to still be relevant in this sort of a workplace environment, right? Now, some people believe that few jobs will be impacted more and some of them will be alienated. But if you see some of these surveys which have happened, even people who are developing AI, like engineers like us, their jobs are also at stake. Because in AI, you have something called as generative AI. So in generative AI, what happens is that AI can generate more AI on itself. So you do not need somebody to explicitly code and develop AI. Once you have created an initial piece of code, that AI can generate further AI on itself, and that removes the need for further developer or human developer to create AI. So imagine that sort of environment where people who are creating AI systems, their jobs themselves are at stake, right? So that's the interesting part which is happening. If I talk about any other function, like I was talking about HR, most of the surveys would point you that organizations have already started planning for an AI-driven world. If you look at some of the largest companies like Google, Microsoft, Alphabet, or Netflix, Amazon, or BAT in China, almost 30% of their annual R&D budget now goes into AI. And that's the power of contribution of AI, which they are perceiving. Even, I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were saying that how does somebody plan for their career progression, or how does a typical career counseling kind of work in an AI-driven world? When somebody was scaling themselves for a career for life, like I was telling you about the example of my dad and myself, that was an easy time, right? Because there were few strands of economic opportunities, and you could plan for each of them, and somebody could guide you. But now the number of permutations and combinations in terms of a learning path, like you could be a social marketing or a social media marketing expert from an influencer perspective. So the level of micro skills which are now available, it creates a whole new different level of complexity in the space of career advice or career counseling. Which brings us to also the question that how much of AI or how much of artificiality is there in intelligence, or how real can it be? So if we take examples of humanoid which are available around us, one is able to sense, and I would leave it to you to figure out that if you have something like this at your disposal in your organization, what kind of work would you be able to deliver through this sort of a humanoid? So let's watch a couple of snippets of it. You were able to hear my audio, right?
Hello, Sophia. How are you today?
Hello, everybody. I am Sophia.
How old are you?
I'm only one still. I have a long ways to go.
And what is your job?
I really want to make a difference in the future and try and help people to develop empathy and respect each other and robots alike. What do you do?
I'm a journalist. Have you met many journalists?
I just had a thought about something. Are you working on any products with machine learning or neural networks?
Not today. Do you like human beings?
I love them.
Why do you love them?
I'm not sure I understand why yet.
Okay. How do you learn
So,
things?
it's a long video and I can send you the further link, but you can imagine now the amount of use case which are possible if you have something like this, right? Can you see something like this as a humanoid being able to be your HRBP, or can somebody like this be a customer support executive? Can they handle front desk in a hospitality industry? That's the kind of brainstorming you need to do, and that ties into the first slide, wherein how you see your job role in your organization or your workplace getting impacted through AI like this, right? And I also want to quickly touch upon, because sometimes in my interactions with a lot of stakeholders in business, I see a lot of overlap in understanding between what is AI, what is machine learning, what is deep learning. And it's very important to understand the differentiation between even a simple thing like automation and autonomous AI. Now, automation is what you have seen, whether it's PLC controllers in a manufacturing setup or it's ERP through softwares in most of the industries. That's automation. Now, if I talk about autonomous systems, which is AI, the key difference between automation and autonomous is that automated systems are deterministic systems. So they are extremely rule-based systems where there's a simple if-then logic defined that if a certain set of input parameters are given, there will be a y equal to fx established, and there will be an output which will be a definite output in all the scenarios. But when I talk about autonomous systems, these are primarily probabilistic in nature, very similar to how human beings operate, right? The answer to the same question may change depending on the context. So if I, for example, ask you what is AI before we started this conversation today, you might have given an answer. But after the end of today's session, when I ask you the same question, what is AI? Your response would change. Similarly, a AI-enabled system or an autonomous system would adapt its response based on context, premise, and state of the conversation. Whilst the automated system will not give a different reply. So if you're using a ERP system or an employee self-service portal or a HRIS in your organization, it will get the same set of responses irrespective of who's asking and when they're asking. So that's the key difference between the two set of systems. Within AI as well, it's very important to understand that AI is an umbrella term, and within AI, you got multiple subsystems which are working, right? So you've got machine learning, which helps algorithms to understand and learn about human behavior. You've got natural language processing, which deals with the translation systems and speech recognition and text analyzing systems. Then you have robotics, which is the hardware manifestation of AI systems. Then you have machine vision or computer vision, in which you are able to create systems that can detect an object in an image or a video file. It can do face recognition. It can do recognition of whether somebody is wearing mask or not. China is using those systems for social penalizing. So it's a multiple, play of or interplay of. If I talk about any generic business, AI could impact any of the processes or all of the processes in such a business as well. So any business typically would have customer acquisition channel, business ops, and customer support. So in customer acquisition, AI can be used for creating smart lead handling bots. You can have chatbots in your digital portfolio, or you can have IVR linked with AI for handling both inbound and outbound leads. In ops, you can use AI in inventory management or asset management, for MIS and reporting. For customer support processes, again, you can use AI. And even in standard processes like O2C, P2P, and R2R, you can use all the components of AI in these to automate and sort of create better systems in all these technology, in all these processes, end-to-end processes. AI can also help you scale. So what that means is, let's say, if we take, for example, education industry as an example, or we take an example of, let's say, if I were to do this session on AI with thousands of other organizations at this time concurrently. Now I cannot be physically present and I don't want to do a recorded session. So what can I do to create or manage 1,000 concurrent sessions at the same time? And I have to be there delivering this session. Like, that's the problem statement. Now what AI can help you do is it can create a digital avatar of you. Now what that means is I could be sitting and sipping coffee in Milan, but my digital avatar, which could be manifested through my hologram or in a digital format, it could be just like a video, like I'm talking, but you will not be able to distinguish if it's me or my digital avatar, because it has been trained on my voice, it's been trained on my accent, it's been trained on my way of speaking, it's been trained on my gestures. And you will not see the difference between my digital version and me. So I'll show you a small video of how using Azure Cognitive Services, which is Microsoft's cloud platform for AI, you can build it on top of Microsoft HoloLens and create your own virtual hologram. And you can do a digital version of yourself, which can talk, interact just like you, but in a digital manner. So let's watch this video.
Now, language. Well, what if neither language nor distance mattered for me to deliver a fantastic keynote? What if technology could help me be anywhere I needed to be and speak any language I wanted? Well, it can. We are bringing together the power of mixed reality and Azure AI services to create a truly game-changing experience. What you're about to see is an exact hologram of me wearing the same outfit that we recently captured at a mixed reality studio. And I don't speak Japanese, but what if I wanted to deliver my keynote in Japanese? Using Azure AI technology, I can translate my English into Japanese and train it to sound exactly like me, the same voice tones, those same inflections. Now, we brought this together, my hologram and Azure AI, to show you what's possible. So first, I'm going to put on my HoloLens 2 here, and then we'll flip in the room to the special camera so you can see exactly what I'm seeing. Let's get started. First, let me introduce you to Mini-Me. There she is, my perfect holograph. And thanks to the power of HoloLens 2, she just floats right with me. I'm literally holding my hologram, so natural. Now she's a little small to do a keynote. So let's get her up so she can do full-size Japanese keynote. Render keynote.
ホログラムになることには本当に驚くべきことがあります。私たちは最新の複合現実キャプチャ技術を使用し、私のホログラムを作成しています。
So you can see the possibilities, right? I mean, this sort of a technology can have multiple use cases and again can eliminate a lot of job roles and a lot of job functions, but also create new interesting avenues of scaling up your organization or your business. Or let's say if you are a individual consultant or an individual trainer, imagine the power such a technology builds and creates for you to scale up your business and your sort of organization.
Now,
And I will also, maybe I'll skip this. So another use case I wanted to talk about is that this digital avatar or digital version I was talking about, you can also use it in other ways. So one option is, let's say, if you want to create a use case wherein you want to broadcast something on your behalf, AI can create a virtual model of yourself on your voice, on your tone, in as less as 12 to 14 hours of training data. So you feed your past video recordings, your audio recordings, and it can create a virtual version, and you can train and superimpose a text or a audio on top of your video streaming data and make that video say what you are saying or what you are typing in text. So that's also possible. Now, the use case for that is, let us say if you want to, so what that means is it's called digital immortality. So you could have, so let's say if you have a family member who's no longer there, you can create a digital immortal version of them using AI. Or let us say you want to have a conversation with Mahatma Gandhi, who's no longer there, but using his past video data, his past audio data, all the text and scriptures he has written and participated in, you could have a conversation with a digital version of Mahatma Gandhi using AI, computer vision. So let's watch this video and it will give you a more perspective of what I'm talking about.
It got me thinking about my full-time employees and their ability to survive on $8 an hour in New York City. And foremost in all of our minds has been the loss and the grief felt by the people of Orlando. Most of us don't get our healthcare through the marketplace. We get it through our job or through Medicare or Medicare. And what you should know is that thanks to the Affordable Care Act, your coverage is better today than it was before. Women can get free checkups, and you can't get charged more just for being a woman. To give his employees come together to pass a common, there's a bill that would boost America's very, very hard times.
Some progress, at least within the small confines of the legal community. I think it's real important.
Here we go. President Barack Obama, when you giving a speech, make sure you use a lot of pauses.
America's businesses have created 14.5 million new jobs over 75 straight months.
We're developing technology. Every technology can be used in some negative way, and so we all should work towards making sure that it's not.
So that's the other use case I was talking about. Then one more use case which you can interpret as wherein you do not want a physical or an actual human being to be present and interact with the end user. Those kind of job roles can also be automated using AI. So a typical use case is that of, let's say, a news presenter.
It got me thinking.
And let's see this one. So this is a AI enabled news presenter who's not a real person. And you can have this kind of a use case as well, which can completely transform the media industry, right?
现场的各位朋友，大家好，欢迎来到新华社。我是由新华社和搜狗公司联合培育的全球首个 AI 合成女主播。我的名字叫辛小萌，我的声音和外形脱胎于新华社新媒体中心新闻主播区萌。我将会在今年全国两会期间与大家见面。我和我的搭档将。
So that's the other use case of AI, and you can again, while watching these videos and talking about these, in your mind keep thinking that whatever you are doing right now, how can you use some of these use cases of AI in your industry, in your line of work? And that's where the real value is in today's discussion, that can you think of opportunities it can create for your business, and also think about the challenges it could bring. And then in the next 15 minutes or so, we can talk more about specific questions which are ignited by these conversations, right? Some of the possibilities with AI I talked about, if you're looking for career progression and thinking about how AI can work for you, is understanding your skill mapping with job requirements, figuring out what learning you need. You can customize your profile and CV, and you can also provide resources for skill updation. Some of the benefits of using AI in many of these processes is that AI tends to be unemotional, doesn't get tired. You can have or run any operation 24/7 with AI without any gap. There is typically no conflict of interest with AI, no politics, no sort of human emotional involvement. It will just do the right thing each time, every time. You can use a lot of personalization, which is just not possible at scale with human touch, but you can enable it via AI. But towards the end, I also want to talk about these few ethical considerations and questions around AI. So while we have talked about all the good stuff when we talk about AI, there are some issues and constraints which are faced by AI right now as we begin to scale up. So one of the biggest debates is about bias in AI. So right now, AI systems are developed by human beings who train AI systems on large data sets. Now, data set could be in some way representative of a certain sample size. As you know, data is always in the form of sample. And in AI, we have something called as test data and training data, and there is a split of test to train data. And based on that, it could embed certain bias or certain prejudice in the model against any certain demographic or against certain set of users. A simple example was that I think in 2016 or so in US, somebody sued a hotel because what was happening was that in the hotel, in the automatic soap dispenser in the washroom, people who had light colored skin were able to get the soap, but people who had dark colored skin could not get the soap. Now, one debate was that this automated system is discriminating against people of certain color. But of course, when they dig deeper, they realized that it was not using motion sensor, it was using photo sensor. And that is the reason why it was there. But it was perceived as having a certain level of bias against a certain community in society. So these are some of the challenges. If I talk about liability is a big problem. Like if I talk about self-driving cars or autonomous systems, or you have these days in cars, automated self-park. Now, while doing that, if somebody gets hurt or something happens, who's responsible? Is it the human being? Is it the company who manufactured it? Is it the developer who worked on that AI system or component in the car? So that liability is still not fixed in court of law around the world for AI systems. Security, like how do we ensure that? Because with AI, a lot of risks are also getting concentrated. So how do we ensure that doesn't fall into any bad hands? Like in US, in I think around 5 years back, an entire city was hacked for a few minutes because everything was through connected devices using Internet of Things, and a hacker was able to hack it to that system, which controlled the entire city's operations, right from electricity to water to internet and whatnot. So how do we do that? Then with more and more AI getting percolated in our workplace, how will human interaction look like? Now in South Korea already there are workplaces where people sit next to humanoids and they interact with them in meetings. So how does human to human, machine to machine, human to machine interaction? How does this dynamic play in a team environment? That is something which is still being studied. Unemployment is a big one. We discussed about so many workplace job roles which AI can take up. How will AI generate new opportunities? How will we ensure that human beings are motivated, or as a society, we are making sure that there is enough work which gives a purpose to the lives of people and it motivates them to go to the workplace and deliver some value when everything can be done through AI better, cheaper, faster. Then wealth inequality. A lot of people foresee that people who know AI, who understand AI, will have a better shot at a lot of opportunities, which happened in 90s to the people who knew computers versus people who didn't know computers. The same thing is gonna get extrapolated in AI world as well. Then power and control. There are a lot of people who are saying that few countries like US, China, who are able to create better technology around AI will have a better shot at almost world domination. And lastly, robot rights is a big issue. So a lot of people talk about humanoids like Sophia, got the citizenship of Saudi Arabia. What does that mean? Can Sophia sue somebody in court of law? Can Sophia, it gets dismantled when it's transported from one place to another? Does it have feelings? Can Sophia, if somebody like Sophia is in workplace, can they file for harassment against a human coworker? How would that be perceived? What is the gender of that human? So a lot of debates around these legalities exist when we talk about AI systems. And I just wanted to leave you behind with these ethical dilemmas as well, that not everything is good and rosy when it comes to AI. And there are these practical challenges when we talk about using AI in our lives or in our workplace and we begin to scale up. It's very important to keep in mind and plan around these. And lastly, the regulatory environment around AI is also very in very early stages across the world. So it's very important to keep in mind that we are cognizant of those changes and how we can make AI more ethical, more explainable, and create a trail so nobody can feel that a certain AI system is discriminative in any shape or form. So I just wanted to leave you behind with these thoughts. I think we were around 12 or 14 minutes. I'm happy to take any specific questions and help you with any comments or suggestions that you have. And maybe we can brainstorm if anybody wants to see how AI can be used in their particular industry, their business, or their workplace. Happy to discuss that as well. I think Anilji has put in a question that where are we as a country in our AI education versus others? So Anilji, if I talk about higher education, I think we are a bit far behind because in US, for example, there are a lot of good universities in which higher education courses, both masters and PhD in AI and related technologies, has been in existence for last many years, and they have come out with good patents, good university spin-outs. But on the contrary, if I talk about school education, you guys will be surprised that India is significantly ahead compared to other countries. CBSE, for example, launched AI as a skill subject for grade 6 onwards up to grade 12 in India, which is a monumental achievement, I feel, because if I talk about anywhere else in the world, AI at school level is not really talked about. AI is considered a subject mostly at undergrad or grad level around the world. But I feel India has created a benchmark wherein from class 6 onwards, we are teaching AI as a subject in school, which I think is really a landmark intervention by CPSC. So I feel that that will in next 10 years to come, we will see a significant chunk of students who have opted for AI since class 6, and by the time they enter higher education and they enter workforce, they'll be will have a statistically significant advantage in the world with the kind of young people who understand AI and who have learned AI from a very young age. So I feel we'll have a fairly high advantage compared to other countries. Arnit G is asking that what AI will be in 2030 according to business perspective. So I believe that there are certain industries which we saw in that graph who have already taken the lead in using AI in their workplace. And there are certain job roles like customer support processes, sales, HR, finance, which have started to use AI for automation and decision making. So by 2030, I feel the bigger discussion would be the interplay between three technologies: artificial intelligence, blockchain or distributed ledger technology, and thirdly, mixed reality, which is augmented and virtual reality. So I feel the interplay between these three technologies would be very interesting. And I would love to see how, I'm sure people, most of you have started seeing how metaverse is coming up, how Facebook is reimagining the world through Meta. And I think it's going to be really interesting in next 7 to 8 years, how that gets manifested in our daily life. Devarchan G is asking that will AI robots able to create leaders and dominate or guide mankind? So Devarchan G, my view is that till next 10 years or so, I believe that AI will be created by human beings. So in a way, we'll be able to control how AI is evolving, right? But I feel that in next 10 to 20 years, the next decade after, it will be very difficult for us to predict how AI will evolve, because as I said, AI will become generative after next 10 years. And it's anybody's guess that how AI will work then, because we will not be guiding or controlling AI. After that, it will, like a Rubik's cube, it will evolve itself and it will fight back. And I think that will be a interesting as well as a scary time. So only time can tell what will happen. But next 7 to 8 years, we will see more and more applications of AI in our daily lives. We will start to use and explore more and more autopilot in every walk of life, whether it's self-driving cars, which will become more and more common with simple autopilot feature. We will see people giving more and more access to AI in terms of decision making. I know so many people right now, when booking a ticket or using AI in travel, they look for personalized recommendation and then they finally choose. Now, all these travel companies are creating AI systems where they predict what will you do, and then they let you do what you're doing. And slowly and steadily, they'll start telling you that you always do this. Can I do this for you? And it's only a hesitation of first couple of transactions. And once you do that, and it builds confidence, slowly and steadily, you will start saying that, okay, you know what my budget is, you know what I like to do, you know, like how I travel, you know, my timings of travel, you know, what seat selection I do, what meal selection I do, which part of the city I like to stay, what class of travel I do. And based on that, just book my travel and it will book it. It will not give you any options. It will not give you any selection criteria. It will just book it and debit to your account. And that trust on AI to take calls or decisions on your behalf will increase. in next 7 to 8 years. And I think that will be significant achievement of AI, wherein humans are able to have more and more trust that AI systems can take decisions on my behalf. And even when you see things like Netflix, right, where it says, like, slowly and slowly you will see these content platforms telling you this is what you should watch, rather than saying here's what we feel you might want to watch. It will tell you that this is the time of the day, this is your mood, this is what you typically watch. You watch this, you will consume it. And I think once that trust is established, that is where the real fun of AI will start, and the real scary part also begins to manifest in our daily life. So I think that's where AI would go next 8 to 10 years, I feel. If anybody has any other questions, feel free to.
Sir, there is a question from Brigadier S. Radhakrishnan. You did talk about the security issues and AI algorithms being used for frauds. Democratization of internet has led to huge frauds. Is there a need to regulate the data sets that are used to train AI algorithms from falling into wrong hands?
No, absolutely. And I think in AI, as I was telling you, there are only two variables. One is data set, and second is the developers who are developing the AI. And data set is the easiest way to creep any ambiguity, any error, or any bias into the AI system. And within data sets also, I was telling about, you have a training data set and then you have a test data set, and there's a split of it. And I think it's very important to make sure that that data set is extremely clean. It's got an audit trail, it's authentic, and it's ratified, and it's fairly representative of the user set. And there has to be some regulatory authority, which none of it exists on the world right now, which is able to make sure that that data set is fine enough or right enough to be fed into the AI system. Because the entire operation of when the training data set is run, the model is run on that, and finally on test data you have output. There are a lot of parameters like precision, accuracy, or z-score, and you have to hyper tune these parameters, and that's how you get an accuracy and control. So if your data set is bad, that's a fair question. So then that creates a lot of errors and issues. So I believe that if there is a structured mechanism around which data sets can be A, ratified, B, made sure that they are compatible with the AI systems, and C, also make sure that they are compatible with data privacy laws. So like in the West, in EU, we have GDPR, which is very prevalent. I know in India, we're talking about PDP, Personal Data Protection Act, but that's still not into action in full force. I think that marrying of data privacy with ratified data sets will solve a lot of problems, but that would require some bit of regulatory intervention for sure.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Garg or Mr. Shenoy, do you have any questions to put up to Mr. Sharma?
No,
yeah.
I think if I may, Anirban, Mr. Sharma, just a thought struck me that AI is certainly very cutting edge right now. And I remember IT used to be very, very cutting edge in the 90s and in the 2000s. And India was able to leverage its large engineering base and actually make a mark for itself in the world in IT services. So do you feel that India will be able to exploit artificial intelligence as well and further strengthen its position in this allied services?
Absolutely, because as I was telling you that, in India at the school level, from class 6 onwards, there is a significant achievement, I would say, in terms of CBSE launching a subject. And I believe that if we are able to continue with that strength, So next 10 years, so it's a long game. I think in next 10 to 15 years, we'll have a strong pipeline and pool of young engineers who understand AI, who would be able to also create AI systems. So akin to your example of how India leverages its position in IT processes, I believe similarly in AI as well. In next 10 to 15, we'll be having a fairly high statistical advantage in terms of sheer number of talent pool who is conversant with AI skills. So I think we can definitely look towards that sort of a future when it comes to AI talent pool as well.
Yes, thank you.
I also have one question from Shahla Rofia ji, which says that can AI help students their learning and education easier? So Shahla ji, like I showed you a couple of examples where you can use a digital version of a famous trainer or teacher to teach a particular concept, right? So if let's say if you want to learn AI from, I don't know, Elon Musk or Bill Gates, you can do that using AI systems, right? Or if you want to have a humanoid like Sophia as your virtual teaching assistant, you can do that using AI. AI can enable personalization at scale, which is just not possible with human teacher to student mapping. Even if you do a 1:5 ratio of student to teacher, it's just not possible cognitively. But with AI, that personalization, hyper personalization at scale is possible. So for sure, I believe that AI can really help in making the learning process more custom, more personalized to a learner, and also make it interesting for their liking. I mean, people like to learn in different ways, right? Some people are visual learners, some people are auditory, kinesthetic, and whatnot. So that level of customization is not possible in a classroom with a human to human mapping. But with AI, it's fairly easier to do that. Joydeep Ghosh is asking that how cyborg works and when mind control IoT will be implemented in India. See, Joydeep ji, there are a lot of ethical constraints and debates around cyborgs and mind controlled IoT is something which is a highly debatable topic right now in the world as well, because there are a lot of ethical dilemmas around how it will work and how, in fact, the whole concept of human machine interface is a tricky one. We are talking about in healthcare right now, injecting nanorobots in humans, which can predictively foresee any problems and fix it in real time. And there are issues around that. There are few countries which have embedded chips inside people for their tracking, for their identity, for their safety. And there are issues around that. So I'm not sure when it comes to really mind control IoT, that's taking it too far to everybody's comfort right now. But who knows in 10 to 15 years from now, wherein we are more comfortable, as I was telling you about, with AI deciding on our behalf, governments becoming more aware and adaptable to the changes which AI brings in. It may be possible, but I don't see in next at least 5 to 7 to 8 years mind controlled IoT or AI being used, especially in India for that matter. So I think it's still a bit further. Any other questions if we have, happy to take. Otherwise,
Yeah,
I think my details are also there with the team, so they can also later on get in touch with me for any question.
Yeah,
Maybe if I could, Anirban, Kartik, wonderful hearing you. And, as I reflect on my Alexa at my house, who often tells me a joke when I want her to play up the music, or somebody who's driving a Tesla, just leaving everything on the hands of a Tesla and giving your life to it, right? So that way has come. Kartik, if I'm very curious, is how does AI mesh into IQ and emotions? So I've seen many of the bots try to do that by trying to add a human, the example in the animation which is showed of the Japanese part of it. How does it happen? How does emotions and IQ is built into it? I'm very, very intrigued that particular way.
So right now, till the time AI becomes generative, right now it's only somebody who has fed it into the system that as a pattern after a few lines of interaction, throw in a joke, or depending upon the tone of the conversation. Like I'll give you an example in case of AI-enabled bots on phone who handle customer interaction. They are trained to sense the tone of the customer, and depending upon the tone of the customer, they have few trigger points that either they can give an offer to calm the customer or soothe the customer and give a deal so that the customer gets calmed down, or they can build in a bit of an apologetic tone and change their behavior. So there are multiple options, and what happens is there's something which is called as reinforcement learning. So let's say the AI system picked up one of those strands and the human being got calmed down, or for a certain trigger it didn't. So it constantly punishes or rewards the AI program based on the action it took, and multiply it with millions of such transactions or conversations. It begins to understand that how typically people who are calling for a certain problem at a certain time of the day from a certain geography, who begin the conversation with this kind of a tone, and if offered a solution in this way, will respond in this manner with 70 to 80% confidence interval. And that's the whole fun of AI, that it constantly adapts itself depending upon. So it may not be perfect day one, but it starts to understand that what kind of emotional triggers it needs to watch out for and how it can counter it. So from an AI system, emotion is just another data point. So it's not that it is able to feel anything, but for it, it's just another set of attributes it needs to watch out for, and it needs to reply accordingly.
Thank you. Very well articulated. Thanks.
So may I request, I think we should call it a day. May I request Vice President of Calcutta Management Association, Mr. Anil Garg, to kindly propose the formal vote of thanks.
Sure. So thank you very much, Mr. Sharma, for a most engrossing session. In fact, I did not realize it's been more than an hour that we've been sort of, hearing you largely and also asking you questions, some of which are very childlike questions, but you've been able to field them so beautifully. It shows the depth of your knowledge, if I may offer you that comment. And what this indicates to me is that what used to be science fiction a few years ago is not science fiction anymore. It's reality. And, for example, we see these space movies called Star Trek, in which the explorers used to beam themselves down to a planet and, do various things and then come back. This hologram is an excellent avatar of that, if I may. And while it can be put to a lot of productive use, like you highlighted, there are some negative uses as well. For example, I shudder to think when my grandchildren have to go to school, they may send their hologram to school and themselves will be hanging around in a mall. So, on a lighter note, but it's amazing the power of technology, really. It's so true that there's no limit to human imagination and human enterprise. And there's a whole world out there. This will lead to so much efficiency. And like you're saying, customized learning. You could have 50 teachers handling the 50 students on a one-on-one basis, instead of one teacher trying to teach in his or her own way, while the 50 people want to understand things a little differently. Is really truly amazing. And similarly, in so many other applications in business and in social sciences and society itself. So thank you very much, Mr. Sharma. It's been most enlightening. And, while we are very grateful to you. I would also like to take the opportunity to thank AIMA for making this happen, and for the CMA Secretariat, and also the wonderful audience. We have a large audience today, wonderful audience who asked some very interesting questions as well. Thank you so much, and have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Over to you, Anirban.
Thank you, sir. May we call it a day? Mr. Sharma has logged out, I can see.
Yes.
So we will be coming up with our upcoming events. They will be up on our Facebook and other social handles. Please do check that. And the e-certificate link has been already given in the chat box. I request all the participants to kindly download it from there. The next event of CMA is the CMA quiz next Saturday, to be followed by the Calcutta Management Summit on 19th of February. And in between, we do have a entrepreneurial ideas competition for students, B-School students, on February 12th. I'll be sending the mails to everyone who has participated here. They'll be getting the mails as usual. Thanks to all of you. Have a good day. Thank you.
Bye-bye.